Well, the third annual PocketCon convention is taking place this weekend. That is a Chicago-based gathering focusing on comic books by artists of color, particularly African-American authors and artists, as well as comic books with a lead character who is black. Here to talk about PocketCon are Elgin Bokari, who created PocketCon convention, and Ashley Woods, who is a featured artist at the convention. And welcome both to Chicago tonight.
Hello.
Well, let me ask you a very basic question. Tell me more about what PocketCon is.
PocketCon, I actually am the co-creator with Kendra Medley Welch, and it's a convention that celebrates characters of color. And while we do this, and we hold it on the South Side for free for teens and youth, and basically it's just a celebration of characters that look and breathe and smell and look like us. So I want to really place the focus on just characters of color, because often as a teacher, when I go into a classroom and I ask youth like if they know any characters of color, usually when I first started PocketCon, I got maybe like one. And now today I walked in the classrooms like, can you name me a character of color? And I get like Luke Cage and Black Panther right off the back, or Static Shock, Green Lantern, which is really just a wonderful thing to hear now.
Ashley, why is that important, especially coming from the comic book culture?
Well, it's important because as a black person myself, you need someone to relate to.
But why comic books as a means of relating to other figures?
Well, whether it's comics or movies or anything, lots of black children read comics or grew up on comics. I'm one of those kids. I'm an adult now, but that's my background, my upbringing in comics. And so, yeah, that's for Rayla 2212. It's a novel by Yatasha Womack. And so those are some concepts. She travels through time, and so those are different concepts representing what time she's in.
And how popular are these comics with young people? Because I'm not into the comic book culture. I was just wondering.
It's pretty popular.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
It's a big selling point. I think people want to see something new. There's a change, a big progression happening right now in the media, and it's only growing more and more.
And actually this comic book convention is held on the South Side in conjunction with the Chicago Public Library, especially in Grand Crossing. So this year they got a $500 budget to get even more characters of color inside of the Grand Crossing Library, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing.
How did you get into comics? I mean, because I'm looking at this pamphlet that you created. I think we also have some other depictions of it. This is a pamphlet you created. Well, you describe what I'm holding.
Oh, well, that booklet that you're holding is it's a guide to your juvenile rights for Chicago, Illinois, and it basically helps a young person deal with police interactions if they ever have to be stopped by a police officer here in Chicago. This is how they would get from A to B, what you're supposed to say, what you're not supposed to say, and this was a collaboration with Northwestern Law School. And
you were telling me before we went on the air that about 5,000 of these have been distributed. Who was your role model for getting into comic art?
I would say my parents. My mother was very much, she's into film, Hasevi Kushma, and also my dad was really big into comic books too. So I guess it was just kind of inherent, so I just love comics and just read. It's escapism, which I think it is for
When
most
did you
kids.
realize that you could actually draw?
I think probably middle school. My third grade art teacher's name was Mr. Strickland. He was really heavily into comic books, and he helped me make my first comic book actually in fourth grade.
Really?
Yeah.
So like when you were like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Ashley, how about you? How did you get into this?
Well, I actually got into it through my mother. She collected comics in the 70s, and so I inherited all of her old books. And I took it a step further and, just started creating based on what I saw and was inspired by. I've always drawn. It was just second nature. I can't really give you a beginning.
Well, you earlier said that there were not that many characters of color coming up. So what were the comics that you were looking at when you say your mom and when you say your dad had comics? For example, what kinds of comics did they have?
Oh, wow.
My mom had X-Men.
X-Men?
X-Men and X-Men, lots of Marvel and DC.
And how about you?
I grew up on a lot of X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman very heavily, and I was very much into cartoons and animation. So my favorite growing up was like the boom of like all the animated series. So Batman the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series was like.
My mom collected heavy metal too.
Oh
yeah. Heavy
Well,
metal.
listen, with comic books, there's some recurring themes. You know, action figures, fantasy, time travel, all that. How is the voice of minority comic book artists different from their white counterparts, since you're dealing with many of the same themes?
Right. It's this thing that's being talked about, especially in Black comic books, is this male masculinity. You know, you can't just be a Black superhero. You have to be a Afrocentric, super Black man if you're going to be a Black and superhero.
What does that mean exactly?
And that means like hyper masculine means like you can't just be strong. You have to be super duper uber strong, and you also have to be doing this for. You have to do this for your struggle of your people, and it often came about because a lot of the comic book characters that were being created, the first couple of ones being Black Panther, Luke Cage, Green Lantern, were all written by Caucasian writers. So it was almost like a hyper fantasy of what they thought the Black experience would be like. So they were trying to create this character who had to be a bit more than just a character. You had to be a lot more.
So you're saying that those depictions, what, lacked authenticity? Lacked true
Sometimes.
resonance?
To a degree.
Pardon me?
To a
To a degree.
Because Elgin's not like
How about
hyper,
for women women of color characters in cartoons? What are you trying to convey with that?
I just want to show people as people. I don't really put too much thought into like the whole hyper stereotypes. I draw from life, what I see, and so that's what makes my stories and my characters unique. Honestly, what are some Black female? Well, Storm,
Storm, Vixen.
Yeah. I don't read too many American comics, so all I know is Storm and Vixen.
You know, there has been a controversy over the when a comic book becomes a film. There have been controversies about casting when a character in a cartoon was white and then a Black character or a Latino character is cast. What do you make of that? What's going on?
You know, I call it the Gambino syndrome.
Gambino.
So it was, if I don't know if you knew, but when they came up with the new idea of reintroducing the Amazing Spider-Man, an actor by the name of Donald Glover actually wanted to be cast. He wanted to audition to play Spider-Man. He's known for being on Community and a few other shows.
He's an African-American actor.
Yeah. So they were like, "Oh, well, you can't do that. You know, it's not allowed." And I couldn't remember if he was even able to audition for the role. And when it came out, like a lot of fans reacted by saying, "Oh man, that would actually be kind of cool." But then, "Oh, that's kind of messed up. They weren't even able to try out." So with the Nick Fury aspect of that, like Samuel Jackson becoming Nick Fury, it was more
So
on.
Samuel Jackson, an African-American actor, is taking on the role of a white character in a comic book.
And that happened because they did this new twist in the comic books called the Ultimates, and the new, which is kind of funny because like when they redid some of the characters, Samuel Jackson's facial expressions was actually like in the comic book. So when you looked in the comic before the movies, it was like, that's Samuel Jackson. That's what? You know, so you kind of
So the transition was not that jarring.
Yeah, it was actually kind of perfect for the role.
And then Idris Elba in Thor, when he did the Norse god,
Yeah.
a lot of people were angry about that. Idris Elba.
What do you hope comes from your work?
I just hope that people become more open-minded. They're not so focused on a lot of tropes or stereotypes. I just want people to appreciate a good story. That's how I've always approached comics and manga and video games, movies. Just look at it as a story.
Thank you for telling your stories and sharing them with us. Elgin Bokari and Ashley Woods, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Good luck with your convention.
Thank you very much, which is Saturday.